I didn't know my marriage was already over the moment my husband looked me in the eyes and told me to be mature. I didn't know that agreeing to one Christmas dinner would quietly turn into the most humiliating, revealing day of my life. At the time, I thought I was just being sensitive, overthinking, reading too much into things the way women are always accused of doing. I told myself that love meant trust, that marriage meant compromise, that jealousy was a flaw I needed to work on, not a warning I should listen to. I was wrong. My name is Emily. I'm 29 years old, and until last Christmas, I had been married to my husband Ryan for 3 years. 3 years of believing we were solid, stable, the kind of couple people looked at and assumed would last. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment everything began to crack. But in the moment, I brushed it aside, smiled, swallowed my discomfort, told myself I was being mature. Every year, Christmas at Ryan's parents' house followed the same script. His mother transformed the house into a festive explosion of lights, wreaths, and porcelain Christmas villages. His father parked himself in front of the TV with football on full volume. His sister brought her kids, who turned the living room into a battlefield of wrapping paper and cookie crumbs. It was loud, chaotic, imperfect, and familiar. That year was supposed to be no different. Until 2 weeks before Christmas, Ryan casually informed me that he'd invited Danielle to join us for dinner. Danielle, his ex. Not a distant ex from high school, not a name buried in the past. Danielle, the woman Ryan had dated for 3 years in college. The one whose name still surfaced in stories, inside jokes, and memories I was never part of. I remember standing frozen in our kitchen, wooden spoon hovering over a pot of simmering sauce, my heart pounding hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. I asked him to repeat himself, convinced I must have misunderstood. I hadn't. Ryan told me Danielle was going through a rough time, that she had no family nearby, that inviting her was the kind thing to do. And when I told him it made me uncomfortable, when I asked why he hadn't talked to me first, he sighed, annoyed. Then he said it. Emily, you need to be mature about this. That sentence followed me all the way to Christmas Day, and by the time the front door opened that afternoon, the truth was already on its way inside. Before everything fell apart, I truly believe my marriage was built on honesty. Not perfection, but trust. The kind you assume exists when you choose someone as your life partner. I met Ryan when I was 24. We were introduced through mutual friends at a small housewarming party. I remember noticing his laugh first. Easy, confident, the kind that made people turn toward him without realizing it. He was charming in a quiet way, not loud, not flashy. He listened when people spoke, asked thoughtful questions, remembered small details. At the time, I was working in marketing for a mid-sized firm, ambitious, but still finding my footing. Ryan worked in project management, stable, practical, the kind of man my friends described as marriage material before we'd even been together 6 months. Our relationship moved quickly, but it didn't feel rushed. We talked about everything: future goals, finances, where we wanted to live, whether we wanted kids someday. When he proposed, it felt natural, right, like the next step we were both already walking toward. Danielle was always part of Ryan's history, but in a way that felt contained. Ryan never spoke badly about her, never with bitterness. He described their college relationship as something meaningful that had simply run its course. They'd broken up amicably, he said. Stayed friends, mature adults. At first, I admired that. I told myself it was a green flag, evidence of emotional intelligence. But there were moments, small ones, easy to dismiss. Ryan would sometimes light up when Danielle's name came up in conversation, his tone subtly shifting, softer, nostalgic. When I asked questions about their past, the answers were vague, incomplete. Inside jokes surfaced that I didn't understand, stories that ended before I arrived in the timeline. I told myself I didn't need to know everything. I met Danielle twice during our marriage, once at a summer barbecue hosted by mutual friends, and once at a charity fundraiser Ryan helped organize. Danielle was polite, friendly. She smiled easily, spoke warmly. Nothing overtly inappropriate. But there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. When Danielle and Ryan spoke, it felt like I wasn't in the room. Their laughter carried a familiarity that made my presence feel incidental. They leaned toward each other without realizing it. Shared glances that lingered half a second too long. Each time I felt that uncomfortable tightening in my chest, and each time I swallowed it down. Ryan noticed my silence once afterward, asked if I was okay. I told him yes, that I was tired, that I was probably just being insecure. He nodded, accepted it, didn't ask more, and that became the pattern. When something felt off, I blamed myself. When Ryan brushed aside my concerns, I questioned my instincts. I didn't want to be the jealous wife, the controlling one, the woman who couldn't handle her husband having a past. His family reinforced that pressure without meaning to. Ryan's mother adored him, and adored Danielle too. She often mentioned how fond she'd been of Danielle during college, how sweet she was, how hard that breakup had been for Ryan. Never maliciously, just casually, like Danielle was still woven into the fabric of their family memories. I laughed along, smiled politely, played my role. By the time we'd been married 3 years, I thought we were past all of that. Settled, comfortable, safe. Which is why, when Ryan announced he'd invited Danielle to Christmas dinner without asking me, the shock cut so deeply. It wasn't just the invitation. It was the reminder that I had never fully been alone with my husband in this marriage. There had always been a ghost in the room. And I was only just beginning to understand how much space that ghost still occupied. After that kitchen conversation, nothing looked different on the surface. Ryan still kissed my forehead in the morning. Still asked if I wanted coffee. Still talked about grocery lists and weekend errands like we weren't standing on the edge of something sharp. But inside me, the atmosphere shifted, like the air before a storm when the sky hasn't changed color yet, but your skin knows. That night I tried to talk again. Not to fight, just to be heard. "Ryan," I said softly as we climbed into bed, "I'm not trying to control you. I need you to understand why this feels wrong to me." He didn't even turn fully toward me. He stayed half facing the ceiling, one arm behind his head, the other scrolling his phone. "It's not wrong," he said. "It's Christmas. She's alone. We're being decent." I watched the glow of the screen reflect in his eyes that used to look at me like I was his favorite place to be. "Then why didn't you tell me before you told your mom?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. That made him finally sigh, the kind of sigh that lands on you like a judgment. "Because I knew you'd react like this," he answered. "And I didn't want drama." Drama. Like my discomfort was a performance. Like my boundaries were a tantrum. I swallowed hard. "So you went around me." "I talked to my mom," he snapped, sitting up slightly. "I didn't rob a bank. You're making it bigger than it is." I stared at him, my hands curled into the blanket. "You invited your ex to Christmas dinner." "She's not my ex the way you're saying it," Ryan said, sharper now. "She's my friend." "And I'm your wife," I said, my voice tightening. "Does that matter?" He looked at me then, really looked, and for a split second I saw irritation flicker into something colder. He leaned forward slightly, as if to make sure the words hit their target. "Emily," he said slowly, "you need to be mature about this." There it was again, the phrase that felt like a door closing in my face. I forced myself to nod because I could feel the argument turning into a trap. If I pushed, I'd become the jealous wife. If I stayed quiet, I'd be the good wife. Quiet, accommodating, convenient. So I did what I'd trained myself to do over the years. I swallowed it. "Fine," I whispered. "If you want her there, fine." Ryan's shoulders relaxed instantly, like I'd just passed a test. He reached out and brushed my hair back, almost affectionate again. "Thank you," he said, smiling. "I knew you'd come around." But the smile didn't warm me. It hollowed me out. Over the next few days, the small things began stacking up, tiny moments that wouldn't look like anything to an outsider, but to me felt like needles under the skin. Ryan started texting more, not just quick messages, longer ones. His phone buzzed during dinner, during commercials, in the bathroom with the door shut. When I'd walk into the room, he'd tilt the screen down, not dramatically, but just enough to make me notice. One evening, while I was rinsing plates, I heard him laugh quietly on the couch. An unguarded laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. "What's funny?" I asked, trying to keep it light. He didn't look up, just something Danielle said. My hands paused under running water. "Danielle again?" Ryan finally glanced at me, eyes narrowing, like I was ruining his mood on purpose. "See?" he said. "This is what I mean. You're doing it." "Doing what?" I asked, my voice tight. "Turning everything into suspicion," he replied. "I can't even talk without you spiraling." I felt my throat burn. "I'm not spiraling. I'm noticing." He stood up, walked past me, and kissed the top of my head like it was the end of the conversation. "Let it go," he murmured. It's Christmas. Don't ruin it. And then there was his mother. 2 days after that, she called me, cheerful, warm, the way she always was when she wanted something to feel normal. "Emily, sweetheart," she said brightly, "Ryan told me you're okay with Danielle coming. Isn't that lovely? Poor girl has had such a hard time." My fingers tightened around my phone. "Hard time?" "Oh, yes," she continued, breezy. "Ryan said she's going through a difficult breakup or something. No family nearby. I'm glad you're being understanding." I swallowed, my stomach twisting. So Ryan had given his mother a story. A storyline that made him the compassionate hero and me the supportive wife. "Of course," I managed. "We'll be mature about it." His mother laughed gently. "That's my girl." When the call ended, I stared at the blank screen, feeling something settle in my chest. Heavy, undeniable. Because it wasn't just Danielle being invited. It was the way my husband and his family had decided the narrative without me. The way my feelings were something to manage, not something to respect. And beneath all of it, quiet but relentless, my instincts kept pressing the same warning against my ribs. Something is already happening, and they're counting on you to doubt yourself. That night, I lay awake long after Ryan's breathing evened out beside me. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the digital clock on the nightstand, 1:07 a.m. The numbers burned into my vision every time I blinked. My body was still, but my mind wouldn't stop circling the same questions, sharper each time. Why did he go to his mother first? Why was Danielle suddenly struggling? Why did every attempt to talk end with me being told to be mature? I told myself to let it go. I told myself I was exhausted. I told myself that if I trusted my husband, this wouldn't hurt so much. But my chest wouldn't loosen. My gut felt tight, insistent, like it was trying to speak a language I kept refusing to hear. Ryan shifted in his sleep, turning slightly away from me. His phone lay face up on the nightstand between us, screen dark. I stared at it. I wish I could say I wrestled with the decision longer, that I paced the hallway or cried in the bathroom. But the truth is simpler and uglier. My hand moved before my courage failed me. Carefully, I slid out of bed, every movement slow and deliberate. The floor was cold beneath my feet. I picked up his phone and carried it into the bathroom, closing the door softly behind me. The overhead light felt too bright. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, wide-eyed, like someone bracing for impact. I unlocked the phone. The messages were right there, no password, no hidden app. No effort to conceal them at all. Ryan and Danielle had been texting constantly, morning, afternoon, late at night, every single day. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't that bad. No explicit photos, no graphic language, no obvious declarations. But the tone, the intimacy, was undeniable. Inside jokes I didn't recognize. Long threads reminiscing about college. Remember when we used to... Messages that made my stomach drop. Complaints about stress, about life, about me. I felt something in my chest give way when I read the paragraphs Ryan had sent about how I didn't understand him, how I was too controlling, how I overreacted to everything. He painted me as small, emotional, unreasonable. I pressed my palm against the sink to steady myself. Then I found the exchange from 3 weeks earlier. "Danielle, sometimes I miss what we had. Things were easier back then." Ryan: "I think about that too, especially lately." Danielle: "We were good together." Ryan: "We really were." The room seemed to tilt. I sat down on the edge of the tub, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't friendly. This was emotional intimacy, shared in secret, behind my back, while I was being told to grow up and stop being insecure. My hands moved on instinct. Screenshot after screenshot. Conversation after conversation, evidence stacking up in silent confirmation of everything I'd been afraid to admit. When I was done, I erased my tracks meticulously, deleted screenshots, cleared folders, returned the phone to exactly where it had been. Then I slipped back into bed beside my husband and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I didn't confront him the next morning. Instead, something inside me went cold and precise. If Ryan wanted to rewrite reality, if he wanted to tell different stories to different people, I needed to understand how far the lies went. While he was at work, I opened my laptop and searched Danielle's name. Her social media wasn't private. It didn't need to be. Within minutes, the truth rose up like a slap. Danielle hadn't gone through a breakup. She was engaged. 4 months earlier, August. I clicked through photos of her with her fiancé, Evan, hiking trails, restaurant tables, concert crowds. His smile was open, unguarded. He looked happy, secure, like someone who trusted the woman beside him completely. There was a Thanksgiving post from just weeks ago. So grateful for you and our future. My hands curled into fists. So Ryan had lied to me, lied to his mother, and Danielle had lied to her fiancé, and they had both counted on me staying quiet. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. I could confront Ryan privately, demand explanations, let him gaslight me into doubting the messages I'd read with my own eyes, or I could do something different. That night, I created a burner Instagram account. Nothing traceable, nothing emotional. I sent Evan a short, factual message. I told him who I was. I told him Danielle had been invited to spend Christmas with my husband and his family. I suggested he might want to know. I left my phone number. He replied within the hour. We moved to text, then to a call. Evan hadn't known, had never heard my name. Danielle had told him she'd be attending a work holiday party on Christmas Day. His voice shook as he spoke, but he was composed, clear-headed, strong. When I invited him to Christmas dinner, there was a long pause. Are you sure? He asked quietly. That sounds unbearable. It probably will be, I said honestly, but I'm tired of lies, and I think the truth deserves daylight. Another pause. Then, okay, I'll come. When I hung up, my hands were steady. The next move was no longer about confrontation. It was about truth. And Christmas was coming fast. The week leading up to Christmas passed in a strange, suspended calm. On the surface, everything looked normal. Ryan talked about menus, timing, traffic. He asked what wine we should bring. He even suggested, casually, cheerfully, that maybe we should exchange small gifts with Danielle since she'd be joining us. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Instead, I nodded, smiled, played the role he expected of me. Inside, though, my body lived in two states at once, tight with anticipation and hollow with grief. I wasn't crying, I wasn't panicking, I was observing, watching him the way you watch someone once you realize you've been seeing a version of them instead of the truth. At night, when Ryan slept, I lay awake listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering how long he'd been capable of lying this smoothly, wondering when I had become someone he could mislead without hesitation. Part of me kept asking the same question over and over. What did I miss? Had I been too trusting, too accommodating, too eager to be the cool wife who didn't set boundaries clearly enough? I replayed moments from the past 3 years, arguments I'd smoothed over, discomfort I'd swallowed, instincts I'd dismissed as insecurity. The realization didn't explode. It settled. Heavy. Unavoidable. 2 nights before Christmas, I overheard Ryan on the phone in the living room. It was late. He thought I was already asleep. I stood in the hallway, just out of sight, my back pressed lightly against the wall. Yeah, 2 o'clock should be fine, he said, his voice lighter than it had been with me in months. She'll be there by then. He laughed softly. No, she's good. She came around. My chest tightened. She just needed time, he continued. You know how she is. I closed my eyes. That tone, the indulgent fondness, the familiarity, felt like betrayal in stereo. When he came to bed later, he kissed my cheek and whispered, "Love you." I didn't say it back. Christmas Eve, Ryan was practically glowing. He hummed while wrapping gifts, checked his phone constantly. His excitement buzzed through the apartment like static. I watched him move around our shared space, the couch we'd picked together, the kitchen table where we'd planned our future, and felt a quiet sense of distance settle between us. This wasn't denial anymore. It was preparation. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. We exchanged gifts at home, keeping up appearances. Ryan gave me a watch I'd admired months ago. I thanked him, genuinely touched by the familiarity of the gesture, and deeply saddened by how little it changed what I knew. I gave him the sweater I'd ordered weeks earlier. We smiled, kissed, played our parts perfectly. By the time we pulled into his parents' driveway just after 1, my nerves had gone eerily calm. The house looked exactly as it always did. Lights glowing in every window, garlands framing the door, warmth spilling out into the cold afternoon air. Inside, the smells wrapped around me immediately. Turkey, herbs, butter, baked bread. His mother hugged me tightly. His father barely glanced up from the television. His sister wrangled her kids. Normal. Familiar. For a fleeting moment, guilt flickered. "You're about to blow this up," a voice whispered inside me. "You could still stop." Then I remembered the messages. the lies, the way I'd been made to feel unreasonable for trusting my instincts. I didn't stop. Danielle arrived a little before 2. She was charming, effortlessly so, complimented decorations, brought expensive wine, slipped seamlessly into the rhythm of the family as if she belonged there. Ryan lit up when she saw her. Not subtly, not carefully. His whole face changed. They hugged, longer than necessary. Ryan's hand lingered between Danielle's shoulder blades. I watched without reacting, my expression calm, my heartbeat steady. They sat together on the couch, laughed, leaned toward each other. Ryan touched Danielle's arm when she laughed, the way he used to touch mine. No one else noticed. I noticed everything. At 2:45 exactly, the doorbell rang. My pulse didn't spike. It settled. "I'll get it," I said, already standing. The hallway felt quiet as I walked toward the door. My hand hovered on the handle for a brief moment, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. This was the moment when the story would stop being controlled by lies. I opened the door. Evan stood on the porch, red sweater pulled tight around his arms, a bottle of wine clutched in both hands. His eyes met mine, nervous, resolute, grateful. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm Evan." I smiled, stepped aside, and welcomed him in. And as I led him down the hallway toward the living room, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not rage. Not triumph. Clarity. The living room changed the moment Evan stepped into it. The air didn't shift gradually, it snapped. Ryan's laughter cut off mid-sentence. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost frightening, like someone had pulled the power from him. Danielle sprang up from the couch so abruptly that her beer tipped over, amber liquid spreading across the coffee table and dripping onto the rug. No one moved to clean it. Evan stood still, shoulders squared, chin lifted. He didn't look at Danielle right away. He looked at me. I gave him a small nod. Then he spoke. "Hi," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor I could hear underneath. "I'm Evan, Danielle's fiancé." Silence slammed down on the room. Ryan's mother blinked rapidly, her smile frozen in place. "Fiancé?" she repeated, confused. Danielle opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands hovered uselessly at her sides. Ryan turned to me slowly, disbelief giving way to something sharper. "Emily," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded wrong even to his own ears. "What is this?" I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "I invited her," I said. "I thought it would be nice if everyone who mattered was here for Christmas." His sister's eyes went wide. I saw her hand slide toward her pocket, toward her phone. I didn't stop her. Evan finally looked at Danielle. His expression wasn't hysterical. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet devastation, sharpened by clarity. "You told me you had a work party today," he said. "You said it was a department tradition." Danielle stepped toward him instinctively. "Evan, I can explain." "Don't," he cut in, his voice firm. "Not yet." Ryan found his voice again, this time edged with anger. "Emily, what the hell are you doing?" His jaw tightened. "This is not appropriate." I met his gaze. "You're right," I said evenly. "Lying to your wife and your fiancé isn't appropriate." The room erupted, not with shouting, but with overlapping gasps, sharp inhales, stunned murmurs. Ryan's mother pressed a hand to her chest. "Emily, what are you talking about?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. "Danielle is engaged," I continued calmly, "and Ryan didn't think it was worth mentioning. Just like he didn't think it was worth mentioning to me that he's been texting Danielle constantly for months." Ryan's head snapped toward me. "You went through my phone?" "Yes," I said simply. "I did." The word hung there, heavy. Danielle tried again, her voice frantic now. "It's not what it looks like. We're just friends. He's going through a hard time." Ryan whirled on her. "What are you talking about?" And there it was, the crack. Evan's eyes flicked between them. "You told me you were going through a rough time," he said quietly, "that you felt lonely, that you needed support." Ryan stared at Danielle, incredulous. "You said you were struggling after a breakup." Danielle's face flushed deep red. "Stop," Evan said again, louder now. "Both of you." His voice carried through the room like a bell. "You lied to her," he said, looking at Ryan. "And you lied to me," he said, turning to Danielle. "And you both lied to yourselves if you thought this would stay hidden." Ryan turned back to me, his anger flaring. "You set this up," he accused. "You wanted to humiliate me." I tilted my head slightly. "I wanted the truth," I said. "You're the one who insisted we all be mature about this." His face went pale. I pulled out my phone, not dramatically, not waving it around. I have screenshots, I said calmly. Months of messages about missing each other, about wondering what could have been, about how I'm too controlling for asking questions. His mother let out a soft, shocked sound. Ryan took a step toward me. Don't, he warned, his voice low. I met his eyes. Then don't pretend I imagined it. Danielle reached for Evan again, desperation cracking her composure. Baby, nothing physical happened. It was just talking. Evan laughed once, a short, broken sound. That's worse, he said. You chose her emotionally, every day, while planning a future with me. He turned to Ryan's mother. I'm sorry, he said politely. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend Christmas. Ryan's mother looked torn, her gaze darting between us. I didn't know, she murmured. Ryan told me... I know, I said softly. He told you a version that made sense. Ryan's sister was openly recording now. Danielle finally sagged, shoulders slumping, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Evan, please, let's talk privately. Evan shook his head. There's nothing private left. He straightened, voice clear and unwavering. We're done. Don't come home tonight. I'll have my brother collect your things. Danielle's mouth fell open. You can't just... I can, he said, and I am. He turned to me then. Thank you, he said sincerely, for telling me, for not letting me walk into a marriage built on lies. Emotion pressed tight against my ribs, but I held it in place. Ryan watched him leave, like someone watching a door close on a life he thought he was controlling. Danielle followed a moment later, grabbing her coat in silence. The front door shut. The house felt hollow. Ryan turned to me, shaking, fury and fear battling in his eyes. Before he could speak, I did. I want a divorce. The words landed cleanly. Final. He stared at me, stunned. Emily, you invited your ex to Christmas, I continued evenly. You lied, you emotionally cheated, you made me doubt my own instincts. His mother didn't say a word. His sister lowered her phone slowly. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. His shoulders sagged. He grabbed his coat and left without another word. The door slammed. And just like that, everything he'd tried to balance collapsed under its own weight. After the door slammed shut, the house felt too big. The laughter that usually bounced off the walls during Christmas had vanished, leaving behind an echoing quiet that pressed in from every direction. The turkey sat untouched on the table. The candles burned low, wax pooling onto festive napkins, like time was continuing without asking anyone's permission. Ryan's mother stood frozen near the sofa, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes glossy and unfocused. His father had turned off the television completely, an unspoken admission that something irreversible had happened. No one spoke for a long moment. Then his mother finally broke the silence. I didn't know, she said, her voice trembling. I swear I didn't know. I know, I replied gently. I meant it. She looked genuinely heartbroken, not defensive. But understanding didn't soften the weight settling in my chest. Dinner happened anyway. Not because anyone wanted it, but because it felt wrong to let the day collapse entirely. Plates were filled, forks moved, conversations were quiet, careful, like everyone was afraid of shattering what little composure remained. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Inside, something was unraveling. This was the lowest point, not the confrontation, not the exposure, but the aftermath. The hollow realization that the marriage I'd believed in was already gone long before today. That the man I'd built a life around had been living a parallel emotional world, and I had only just been allowed to see it. When the evening finally wound down, I declined offers to stay. I drove home alone, the streets dark and empty, holiday lights blinking in windows I passed like they belonged to another universe. Our apartment greeted me with silence. Ryan's shoes were gone, his jacket missing. The space felt wrong, too still, too clean, like it had been emptied of oxygen. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. That was when the texts started. At first they were angry. You embarrassed me. You went too far. You had no right. Then they shifted. We need to talk. You misunderstood everything. Nothing physical happened. Finally, desperation crept in. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I love you. I read every message without replying. Each one felt further away from me, like words from a language I no longer spoke. At some point, my hands started shaking. I lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling, the room lit faintly by passing headlights. Tears came without drama, quiet, steady, draining. Not sobs, not gasps, just grief. I cried for the woman I had been, the one who trusted easily, who believed maturity meant silence, who thought love required swallowing discomfort. I cried because even when you're right, even when the truth is undeniable, loss still hurts. Sometime after midnight, I turned my phone face down. The next morning, December 26th, felt surreal. I returned to the apartment with my father-in-law and Ryan's brother-in-law, not for confrontation, but for practicality, to gather essentials, documents, clothes. Ryan wasn't there. On the kitchen counter sat a folded piece of paper. I didn't want to read it. I knew what it would say before I opened it. "I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen. Can we please talk?" The words felt distant, hollow. I folded the note once and dropped it into the trash. Not angrily, not dramatically. Just done. That afternoon, when I was alone again, the weight finally hit fully. The fear. What now? Where do I live? Who am I without this marriage? The questions piled up, heavy and unanswerable. I curled up on the couch and let the quiet swallow me. For the first time since everything began, I didn't feel angry. I felt empty. And in that emptiness, something else emerged. Painful, but honest. I hadn't lost him that day. I'd lost him months ago. I just hadn't been allowed to grieve yet. That night, I slept for 12 hours straight. Exhaustion pulled me under like water. When I woke, the pain was still there, but so was something else. Resolve. Because even at my lowest, even with my heart fractured and my future uncertain, one truth stood clear. I had not imagined any of it. I had trusted my instincts. And for the first time in a long while, I was done apologizing for that. The clarity didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. Quiet moments where the noise finally stopped and I could hear my own thoughts again. I stayed at my parents' house for a few days after Christmas. The familiarity grounded me. My mother made soup I barely touched. My father sat nearby, without asking questions, offering presents instead of advice. There were no lectures, no pressure to reconcile, just space. That space mattered more than anything. A few days later, I met with a lawyer. I brought everything. The screenshots, the timeline, the receipts that showed how much I'd contributed financially to our shared life. As I laid the papers out on her desk, my hands didn't shake. "This is emotional infidelity," she said after reviewing the messages. Clear and sustained. Hearing it labeled, named, felt like someone had finally put words to a wound I'd been carrying silently. "This will matter," she added, "especially since you don't have children and the marriage is relatively short." I nodded, absorbing the information without fear. The fear had already passed. Later that week, Evan texted me. "I ended the engagement," he wrote. "I just wanted you to know." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "I'm sorry," I typed, "and I'm glad you know the truth." He called me that evening. His voice was steadier than before. Sad, yes, but grounded. "She tried to say it was nothing," he told me. "That it was just emotional support, that you misunderstood." I let out a short breath. He said the same thing to me. "That's when I knew," he continued quietly, "because someone who respects their partner doesn't need two different stories." His words settled into me like something clicking into place. We weren't crazy, we weren't dramatic, we weren't overreacting. We had simply been lied to. That realization was the turning point. Not because it erased the pain, but because it stripped away the doubt. Ryan continued to reach out through mutual friends, asking them to reason with me. Some said I'd embarrassed him publicly, that I could have handled it privately. But every time someone suggested that, I asked the same question. When would the truth have come out if I hadn't done what I did? There was never an answer. One evening, about a week after Christmas, I opened my email to find a long message from Ryan. Over 2,000 words. Apologies, explanations, rationalizations. He admitted he'd been confused, that he hadn't meant to hurt me, that he never physically cheated, as if that detail somehow absolved everything else. He said he loved me, that he missed me, that maybe, someday, we could be friends. I read it twice. Then I closed the laptop. For the first time, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not relief, not happiness, but peace. I didn't need him to understand. I didn't need closure from the person who broke the trust. My closure came from knowing I'd chosen myself. A week later, Evan and I met for coffee downtown. There was nothing romantic about it, just two people sitting across from each other, sharing quiet understanding. He looked lighter than he had in weeks. "I started therapy," he told me. "I realized if I don't process this now, I'll carry it into every relationship after." I smiled. "That sounds healthy." He laughed softly. "If you hadn't told me, I would have married her." The weight of that settled between us. We talked about rebuilding, about learning to trust ourselves again, about how betrayal teaches you to listen to your instincts instead of silencing them. When we parted, he hugged me tightly. "Thank you," he said again, "for being brave." That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, not in pain, but in thought. I wasn't broken. I was reshaping. And the realization that carried me forward was simple, undeniable, and powerful. I hadn't destroyed my marriage. The truth had. And once the truth surfaced, all I had done was refuse to lie to myself anymore. The consequences didn't arrive loudly. They arrived steadily, like dominoes tipping one by one, each fall set in motion long before I ever opened that front door on Christmas Day. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Ryan didn't contest anything. He didn't argue over assets or drag things out with false hope. When the paperwork was filed, his signature appeared without hesitation, as if he wanted the entire chapter erased as quickly as possible. The apartment went on the market within weeks. We agreed to divide everything based on contribution, roughly 60-40 in my favor. I hadn't insisted. I hadn't fought. I'd simply presented the facts. The truth, again, did the work for me. Ryan moved in with his sister across town. From what I heard, he rarely left the apartment. The version of him that had been charming, confident, admired, quietly collapsed under the weight of exposure. His parents were polite but distant with him. His mother called me once, voice heavy with regret. "I should have asked more questions," she said. "I trusted him." I told her gently that trust wasn't her failure, it was his responsibility to honor it. His sister didn't hide her feelings at all. "That video is everywhere in the family chat," she told me matter-of-factly. "No one's on his side." I didn't feel victorious hearing that. Just resolved. Danielle disappeared entirely. She deleted every social media account within days of Christmas. Mutual friends whispered that she'd blamed Ryan for ruining everything, while Ryan blamed her for leading him on. Both narratives missed the point. They had both chosen secrecy over honesty, comfort over integrity. Evan thrived. He texted me photos from a solo weekend trip he'd taken, sunlight over water, a coffee cup in his hand, his smile real. He said therapy was helping, that he felt sad, but also relieved. "I dodged a future full of wondering," he wrote once. "That's worth the pain." As for me, I stayed with my parents longer than planned. At first, it was practical. Then it became healing. Family dinners where no one pretended, game nights with my nieces, long walks where I let myself think without judgment. Some nights were still hard. There were moments, especially late at night, when I missed the idea of marriage. The routine, the shared history, the comfort of someone beside you when the world quiets down. But when I imagined him beside me again, the longing vanished. I didn't miss the man who made me doubt my sanity. I didn't miss being told to be mature when my heart was asking to be heard. Friends reached out, some to support, some to criticize. A few said I'd gone too far, that I should have confronted him privately, that public exposure was cruel. I listened. Then I asked one question. "Do you think you would have told the truth if I hadn't?" No one answered. By February, the dust had settled. Ryan sent one last email, shorter this time, less dramatic. He said he hoped I was doing well, that he was trying to figure himself out. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed to. What surprised me most was the calm that followed. I wasn't triumphant, I wasn't angry. I was free. Free from second-guessing. Free from swallowing discomfort to keep the peace. Free from carrying someone else's dishonesty. One evening, my father joined me by the window as snow fell outside. "Well," he said quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder, "that was the most memorable Christmas our family's ever had." I laughed softly, for the first time without sadness attached. "Handled with dignity," he added. "I'm proud of you." That meant more than any defense, any validation, any explanation ever could. The truth had already done what it needed to do. It had revealed character. It had cleared paths. It had ended what no longer deserved to continue. And as I looked toward the future, uncertain but unburdened, I understood something deeply. Sometimes fallout isn't destruction. Sometimes it's release. 2 months after that Christmas, my life looks quieter. Not empty, not broken. Just honest. The divorce is nearly finalized. The apartment sold quickly. I'm in the process of finding a place of my own, something smaller, lighter, unburdened by memories that no longer fit. I'm taking my time. For the first time in years, there's no pressure to rush toward a version of life someone else expects from me. Some mornings I wake up and forget, just for a second, that I'm no longer married. Then the truth settles back in. And instead of panic, I feel relief. I don't miss the marriage the way it actually was. I miss the idea of it, the promise, the version I thought I was living. But ideas don't build trust. People do. Ryan and Danielle destroyed 2 relationships by convincing themselves that emotional betrayal was harmless as long as it wasn't physical. By telling themselves that secrecy was kindness and honesty would be too dramatic. They were wrong, because betrayal doesn't begin in bedsheets. It begins in messages you hide, in conversations you protect, in truths you withhold because they're inconvenient. I didn't win that Christmas. I lost a marriage, but I gained something far more valuable. I learned to trust myself again. I learned that maturity isn't silence. It isn't swallowing pain to keep the peace. It isn't letting someone rewrite your reality until you doubt your own eyes. Maturity is boundaries. Maturity is clarity. Maturity is choosing truth, even when it ruins dinner. Evan and I still check in on each other occasionally. Nothing complicated, just quiet support between 2 people who refuse to marry lies. He's traveling. I'm rebuilding. We're both healing in our own ways. My family jokes that the story will be told for years, that it'll grow more dramatic with time. They're probably right. But for me, it's not a story about revenge or exposure. It's a story about listening, really listening, to the voice inside that whispers something isn't right, and finally believing it. I don't know when I'll be ready to love again. I don't know what comes next. But I do know this. I will never again be mature at the cost of my own truth. And that, more than anything, feels like freedom.